Imagine walking into your local polling place on Election Day, pulling out your driver's license just like you always do, only to be told it's no longer enough to let you vote. For millions of voters, needing a passport or birth certificate to cast a ballot could soon become a reality.
Yeah,
If you enjoy content like this, please take a moment to like, subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications.
definitely do that.
As a quick update, we continue to monitor the Martin Stevens v. OpenAI matter. It is important to note that this is still not a lawsuit. We remain in a voluntary quiet period at the request of Martin Stevens to allow time for any potential developments behind the scenes. At the time of this recording, we do not know whether any progress has been made. No settlement discussions or negotiations have been publicly confirmed. We can also report that the dead man's switch has not been activated, meaning Martin Stevens remains safe from both a physical and legal standpoint. We will provide updates if circumstances change. All right, so let's jump straight into today's deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack a piece of legislation that is just causing massive shockwaves through Washington and, state capitals across the country, too.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere right now.
Yeah. It's the SV America Act, officially known as H.R. 8281. And we are exploring this really intense, escalating battle over proof-of-citizenship voting laws.
And we really have to look at a massive stack of diverse sources to do this properly.
We do. We're looking at the raw legislative text of the bill itself, official congressional press releases, and some really extensive media coverage from across the entire political spectrum.
Right, from right-leaning outlets like PJ Media all the way over to progressive legal platforms like Democracy Docket.
Exactly. But before we really get into the mechanics of all this, I do want to establish a baseline of transparency with you, the listener, because this topic obviously involves some highly politically charged content from across the spectrum.
Yeah, people have very strong feelings about this.
They do. So our goal today is not to endorse any specific viewpoint. We're not here to take sides. The mission of this deep dive is strictly to impartially report the facts, the legislative mechanics, and, well, the arguments exactly as they appear in the provided source material.
Right.
We just want to give you that full 360-degree view so you can understand the entire scope of this debate.
And to really grasp why this single piece of legislation is triggering such a massive political earthquake, we have to look at the anatomy of the bill itself.
Yeah. What's actually in it?
Right. So the Secede of America Act, it fundamentally rewrites the burden of proof required to participate in a federal election. It strips away the presumption of eligibility and replaces it with a strict front-loaded documentary requirement.
So let's lay out exactly what that means for the average person. The bill was spearheaded by Representative Chip Roy from Texas and Senator Mike Lee from Utah, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And its core mandate is just this sweeping prohibition. It explicitly bans states from registering anyone for federal elections unless that person provides documentary proof of U.S. citizenship.
And the legislative text is incredibly rigid about what actually constitutes documentary proof.
Right, it's not just a utility bill anymore.
No, not at all. You can't just bring in a utility bill or even a standard ID in a lot of cases. Acceptable documents include a real ID that specifically indicates citizenship.
And just to clarify, a real ID is that post 9/11 federal standard license.
Right.
The one with the little star on it.
Exactly, yeah. And not everyone has one of those yet.
Definitely not.
So alternatively, you would need a U.S. passport or a military ID with a service record that explicitly shows a U.S. birth.
Okay. What if you don't have any of those?
Well, then you'd need an official photo ID paired with a certified birth certificate, a naturalization certificate, or an official adoption decree.
Wow. And the friction points don't stop there, do they?
No, they really don't, because the bill requires in-person presentation of these documents to election officials.
So you can't just mail a photocopy or, upload a PDF to a state website.
Nope. Has to be in person. Plus, it retroactively forces states to actively comb through their existing voter rolls and purge non-citizens based on this new, rigorous documentation standard.
When you look at the mechanics of this, it sounds like turning the local voter registration desk into an airport TSA checkpoint.
That's a really good analogy, actually.
Right, because you're standing in line, handing over these highly sensitive certified government documents for rigorous visual inspection. But wait a minute, I'm genuinely confused by the premise here.
How so?
Well, isn't it already illegal for non-citizens to vote in a federal election? Like current federal law makes that a felony? What exactly is this bill trying to solve if the law already exists?
Right. So right now, when you register, you sign a form swearing you are a citizen under penalty of perjury.
Exactly.
But the proponents of the Save America Act argue that the penalty of perjury is effectively just an honor system. They maintain that the current laws are completely toothless.
Toothless, because they don't have an enforcement mechanism.
Exactly. They say it lacks a reliable, proactive enforcement mechanism. Former President Donald Trump has repeatedly called this bill his #1 legislative priority for that exact reason.
Okay, so to understand their urgency, we have to look at the mechanics of how votes are tallied and verified, which, looking at the sources, right-leaning outlets like PJ Media heavily focus on.
Yes, exactly.
So let's trace that logic. How do they justify the claim that the current system is failing?
Well, they point to investigations by election watchdog groups, such as Voter GA. According to the sources, Voter GA analyzed the 2020 election data in Fulton County, Georgia, and they claim to find over 17,000 digitally tallied votes that had no actual physical paper ballots connected to them.
Wait, 17,000? Just in Fulton County?
Yeah, and to understand how that mechanically happens, you kind of have to look at electronic ballot scanning.
Right, the actual machines.
Right. When paper ballots are fed into digital scanners, any anomalies like a stray mark or a tear or something, they get sent for electronic adjudication.
Oh.
And watchdog groups claim that for thousands of those digital adjudications, the county couldn't produce the corresponding physical ballot images.
Oh, wow. And to put that number in perspective, President Biden won the entire state of Georgia by roughly 11,000 votes.
Exactly.
So if an election security advocate sees a claim of 17,000 potentially unverifiable digitally tallied votes in a single county, they are going to view that as an absolute existential crisis for the integrity of the system.
Precisely. From that viewpoint, a digital tally without a physical paper trail is a massive vulnerability.
Okay.
So the Save America Act isn't viewed by its supporters as creating a new restriction. It's viewed as building a concrete enforcement mechanism for the laws we already have, just ensuring that only verified citizens even make it into the digital tally in the first place.
Okay, so if this is viewed as an existential necessity by the GOP base, I mean, to the point where Trump demanded Republicans not pass anything else until this was signed into law, why is it currently stalled out?
That is the big question.
Right. The answer lies in the bizarre legislative obstacle course this bill has been forced to run.
Yeah, it really has. Because the bill faces unified opposition from Democrats who view it as a voter suppression tactic designed to disenfranchise millions.
So it was never going to just sail through a divided Congress.
Exactly. Proponents knew it could never pass on its own merits in that environment, so they resorted to a highly aggressive strategic maneuver.
Which was what?
Attaching it as a rider to unrelated, quote-unquote, must-pass legislation.
It's like handcuffing a highly controversial demand to a ticking time bomb like the federal budget and just daring the other side to let the bomb go off.
That is the exact mechanism of a legislative rider. House Speaker Mike Johnson attempted this by tying the Save Act to a continuing resolution.
And for those listening who might be unfamiliar, a continuing resolution, or CR, is basically a stopgap funding measure. It's used to prevent a federal government shutdown when Congress can't agree on a long-term budget.
Right. The strategy there was to force Democrats to swallow the voting restrictions or take the blame for shutting down the entire federal government just months before an election.
But that hostage strategy spectacularly blew up, didn't it?
It really did. 14 House Republicans actually crossed the aisle and joined the Democrats to kill that continuing resolution.
Wow. And it didn't stop in the House. We saw frantic maneuvering in the Senate too, right?
Oh, the maneuvering became incredibly convoluted in the Senate. Proponents tried to attach the Save Act to a $70 billion funding package for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and the Border Patrol.
Okay, when that failed.
When that failed, they tried to jam it into a reconciliation bill dealing with the Department of Homeland Security and FISA.
Okay, let's clarify FISA really quickly. That's the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It's this massive, highly complex national security framework used by intelligence agencies to monitor overseas threats.
Very important stuff.
Yeah, reauthorizing it is generally considered absolutely critical for national security.
Which is exactly why they targeted it. It's the ultimate must-pass vehicle. But as they tried to attach the Save Act, the legislative vehicle started picking up all these other unrelated amendments.
Right, like a magnet.
Exactly. Senator Lindsey Graham even added an amendment to that same package that included restrictions on transgender athletes participating in sports.
So it became a snowball, rolling down a hill, picking up every controversial cultural and political issue along the way.
Basically,
It
yeah.
sounds like a parent trying to sneak pureed spinach into a kid's macaroni and cheese.
Yeah.
I mean, if this bill is so crucial, why are they burying it in border funding and budget resolutions instead of just voting on it as a standalone item?
Because of the realities of Senate math. Because of the filibuster, the bill needs 60 votes to pass. By attaching it to critical funding, proponents are playing a game of chicken.
Daring them to block it.
Right. But amidst all this chaos, you had Representative Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky, engaging in a very public solo defection back in the House.
Oh, right.
He was the only Republican to vote against advancing the SAVE Act when it was packaged inside a broader House Rules resolution.
And former Attorney General Pam Bondi explicitly went after him for that, right?
Yeah, she publicly called him a hypocrite because Massie had previously championed the SAVE Act as a top conservative priority.
But Massey's defection highlights a critical procedural reality in Washington, doesn't it?
Yeah.
His objection wasn't necessarily to the content of the SAVE Act itself, but to the bloated omnibus package it was bundled with.
Exactly. Many constitutional conservatives just despise the practice of bypassing regular order to jam massive multi-subject bills through Congress.
Right. But his defection points to the much larger issue that ultimately doomed the legislation. The overarching strategy failed. Okay, let's break down the math and the motives there. In the Senate, you need 60 votes to advance legislation. Republicans hold a narrow majority, meaning even a standalone bill requires bipartisan support. But why would the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, actively work to block his own party's stated top priority?
It comes down to ideology. The objections from McConnell and Tillis are deeply rooted in a foundational tenet of conservatism, which is federalism.
Oh, yeah.
Under Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution, the administration of elections is traditionally left to the individual states. McConnell and Tillis view the Save America Act as a massive, unprecedented federal takeover of state-run elections.
It's a states' rights issue for them.
Exactly. Senator Tillis articulated the fear perfectly. He essentially argued that if states like California want to implement loose voting protocols, that is their constitutional prerogative.
Right.
But if Congress suddenly claims the authority to dictate exact registration procedures to the states, well, it sets a dangerous precedent. A future Democratic Congress could use that exact same federal authority to mandate universal mail-in voting or ban voter ID laws nationwide.
Oh, so they are playing the long game, protecting the states' rights argument.
Exactly.
But if you're listening and wondering why your driver's license shouldn't be enough anymore, you're hitting on the exact same practical questions raised by Senators Collins and Murkowski. How did they justify their opposition?
Well, Senator Murkowski approached it from a purely logistical standpoint. Mandates designed in a Washington, D.C. boardroom simply do not function in massive, geographically isolated states like Alaska.
Right. You can't just pop over to the DMV if you live in the tundra.
Right. Forcing a voter in a remote Alaskan village to travel to a government office to present documents in person isn't just an inconvenience. It's a monumental, often impossible logistical barrier.
And what about Senator Collins?
Senator Collins focused on the sheer, overwhelming bureaucratic burden of it all. She argued that forcing millions of legal, everyday citizens to suddenly procure passports or locate decades-old birth certificates just to maintain their constitutional right to vote is an egregious overreach.
And this federalist pushback naturally shines a massive spotlight onto the states themselves. Because if the argument is, let the states handle their own elections, you would expect conservative states to easily pass their own versions of this law.
You'd think so.
Right. Take Texas, for example. Texas is practically the national testing ground for strict voting laws. They had a state-level version of the SAVE Act queued up and ready to go.
They did.
It had the enthusiastic backing of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. It had 50 Republican co-sponsors in the State House.
Yeah.
It looked like an absolute legislative slam dunk. So why did the Texas GOP ultimately reject their own bill?
Because the theoretical policy collided violently with granular demographic reality.
Oh, I love that phrasing. What do you mean by that?
Well, according to reporting from Democracy Docket, Republican legislators in Texas experienced severe friendly fire panic. They started looking at the data and realized that strict documentary mandates would disproportionately disenfranchise a massive chunk of their own reliable voters.
Yeah, the data point on this is absolutely staggering. Let's break down the passport statistics for Texas.
All right. In the state of Texas, 45% of the citizen population does not possess a passport.
Nearly half the citizens in the state.
Yeah.
And when you stop and think about the mechanics of everyday life, why would they? Passports are highly expensive, the application process takes months, and if you live in rural Texas and spend your vacations traveling domestically,
Yeah.
you have absolutely zero need for one.
Exactly. And without a passport, the backup option under these bills is an official photo ID paired with a certified birth certificate.
Right.
And this is where the panic truly set in for lawmakers. Emily E.B. French, a policy director for Common Cause Texas, reported that Republican legislative staffers were suddenly fielding an influx of anxious phone calls.
Who are they from?
From rural voters, lower-income constituents, senior citizens, and most notably married women.
Let's trace the mechanics of the married women issue, because it exposes the massive bureaucratic cascade these laws trigger.
It really does.
If you are a woman who changed her last name when she got married 30 or 40 years ago, your birth certificate no longer matches your current legal name.
Nope.
And it doesn't match the name on your driver's license.
Precisely. Under the strict text of these proof-of-citizenship bills, a mismatched birth certificate is invalid for registration purposes.
So suddenly, you have thousands of lifelong, reliable, conservative voters calling their representatives in a panic, asking, wait, am I going to have to hire a lawyer? Am I going to have to go to the county courthouse and track down a 40-year-old marriage license just to prove I am the same person listed on my birth certificate so I can vote for you?
And that reality sank the bill. State representatives realized that the very friction designed to keep non-citizens off the voter rolls was going to catch millions of their own legal constituents in the gears.
It's incredible.
Yeah, the author of the Texas bill even struggled to defend her own legislation during committee hearings. At one point, she falsely claimed that it was easy to get a driver's license updated with a new name.
But wait, under her own bill, a driver's license alone wouldn't even satisfy the requirement to vote.
Exactly. She seemingly forgot her own text.
It is the ultimate example of abstract policy crashing into bureaucratic reality. So if the SAVE Act and its state-level clones are hitting a bipartisan brick wall blocked by Democrats over voter suppression concerns and blocked by Republicans over federalism and friendly fire disenfranchisement, where does this leave election security?
Yeah, what's next?
How are lawmakers attempting to solve this perceived vulnerability now?
We are seeing a distinct pivot away from federal mandates and punitive measures and a move towards state-level, federally funded incentives. Lawmakers are trying to build alternative pathways that increase verification without triggering massive voter purges.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics of these alternatives. What is the first major proposal?
The first is the Save America Through Real ID Act, which was introduced by Republican Representatives Julie Fedorchak and Laura Lee.
Okay.
This bill attempts to solve the documentation gap directly. Rather than banning people from voting if they don't have the right ID, it creates federal grant programs to help low-income Americans obtain real ID-compliant driver's licenses or identification cards entirely for free.
So it addresses Senator Susan Collins' argument about the sheer burden of the mandates. If the government is going to demand a highly specific, secure form of identification to access a constitutional right, the government is going to subsidize the friction and cost of obtaining it.
Exactly. It removes the barrier. Now, the second major alternative focuses on the back-end infrastructure of elections.
What's that one called?
It is called the Election Security Partnership Act,
Yeah.
introduced by Senators Marsha Blackburn and Lindsey Graham.
And how does the back-end mechanism work on that one?
This bill authorizes $20 million in federal grants to incentivize states to submit their official voter rolls to a Department of Homeland Security database known as SVE.
Oh, a database called SEE.
Yes. SAVE-E stands for Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements. It's an existing, highly robust computer program originally designed to check the immigration status of individuals applying for government benefits, like welfare or housing assistance.
So instead of making the voter prove they're a citizen at the front desk, the state takes the list of registered voters and runs it against the federal immigration database on the back end.
That's the mechanical shift. By providing a $20 million grant, the federal government is effectively offering to pay for the IT integration required to cross-reference state voter rolls with the federal database of green cards, visas, and naturalization records.
It's a fundamental change in strategy. It looks like they are putting down the stick and picking up a carrot. Instead of threatening state election workers with federal penalties or mandates, Washington is saying, we will give you millions of dollars in grants if you voluntarily use our databases to clean up your own rolls.
Exactly. And if we look at the philosophical underpinnings here, this incentive-based approach threads a very complex needle. While it directly respects the constitutional federalist arguments made by conservatives like Mitch McConnell and Tom Tillis, leaving the ultimate authority to administer elections firmly in the hands of the states.
Right.
But simultaneously, it provides the exact federal resources necessary to cross-check voter rolls, attempting to balance the intense base-level demand for election security with the practical, logistical need for voter accessibility.
It truly highlights how incredibly fragile and complex the machinery of democracy really is. To recap the journey we've taken on this deep dive, we started by unpacking the strict, uncompromising mandates of the Save America Act, which sought to radically shift the burden of proof onto the voter, requiring physical, certified proof of citizenship at the point of registration.
Right.
We explored the mechanics of how watchdogs analyze digital election tallies, driving the urgency for these laws. We then watched the bill become a legislative hostage, attached to border funding packages and continuing resolutions in a frantic, ultimately doomed bid to bypass the realities of Senate math.
And the most revealing aspect was the resistance. We saw the fatal blow dealt by conservative Republicans.
Yeah.
Federal lawmakers cited deep constitutional concerns over a federal takeover of elections. Meanwhile, state-level Republicans in places like Texas crunched the demographic data and realized that strict document mandates could inadvertently disenfranchise nearly half of their own constituents, specifically targeting rural voters and married women caught in bureaucratic name change cascades.
Which finally landed us on the new frontier of this debate: incentive-based alternatives. Federal grants for free real IDs and millions of dollars to integrate state voter rolls with Homeland Security databases.
It's a huge shift in approach.
As we rapidly approach the next election, the very definition of what constitutes election security is being heavily debated and actively rewritten. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that gets to the core tension of this entire deep dive. If a new law successfully prevents one illegal ballot from being cast, but the resulting bureaucratic hurdles accidentally prevent 10 legal citizens from voting, is that election actually more secure or less? It challenges you to consider where the exact line between protecting the ballot box and protecting the voter truly lies.
That is the question, isn't it?
If you found this episode valuable, please like, subscribe, share, follow, and turn on notifications. It helps us continue bringing you content like this and ensures you never miss future releases.